Johnny Carson really changed pop culture by being the host of The Tonight Show for almost 30 years. Jim Axelrod thinks about this amazing entertainer and the big impact he had. For more than 30 years, Johnny was the star of late-night TV. Every night, people across America would sit in their living rooms, turn on their TVs, and watch Johnny's funny jokes, silly faces, and quick responses. With his nice smile, perfect timing, and relaxed way of acting, he made hosting The Tonight Show look easy. But behind the scenes, there was much more going on that many people did not see, including times that made even him feel worried or mad. Even the king of late-night TV had his hard times. There were times during the show when things went totally wrong. Some guests said the weirdest things or acted badly. Wild animals sometimes made big messes on stage, and a few guests went too far, which could make Johnny's happy mood disappear. Thus, at times weren't just weird. They were really the ones Johnny hated the most. Think about sitting at your desk, being on live TV in front of millions of people, and something weird or surprising happens. You can't just walk away. You have to keep your smile. That was how Johnny dealt with it. He stayed calm on the outside while inside he was really mad. The show must go on. In this video, we will look at 27 times Johnny Carson was really upset during his time in The Tonight Show. From weird guest talks to crazy animal problems, from big fights to shocking moments, these times pushed Johnny's patience to the breaking point. So, get your popcorn and get ready. We're looking behind the scenes to show the real truth of late-night TV. The part where even the most calm host in history couldn't hide his anger, because when things didn't go as planned, Johnny Carson's smile didn't always tell the whole story. The guest who wouldn't stop talking. One of the biggest worries for any talk show host is dealing with a guest who doesn't know when to stop talking. These hosts are made to flow nicely, entertain, and stay balanced. And as back and forth conversation. But things sometimes go wrong. For Johnny Carson, the legend of late-night TV, there was one guest who went way too far. Johnny liked guests who were funny, smart, and nice. He enjoyed people who could tell a great story, but knew how to let others talk too in the conversation. The Tonight Show wasn't just about the guest. It was about how the conversation worked, but during one specific show, that smooth flow was totally messed up. Why? Because the guest wouldn't let Johnny have a chance to talk. From the moment this guest came on, it was clear something wasn't right. Johnny welcomed him with his usual friendly smile and started with a fun question. Do you remember being on stage in front of people? And it didn't stop there. As Johnny tried to guide the talk, the guest just kept talking louder, faster, and with no pause. Each time Johnny tried to ask a question or answer, the guest would cut him off. Even when Johnny made a funny joke, something he was famous for, the guest would stop him or react too quickly, totally ruining the delivery. It was hard to watch. It felt like Johnny had become invisible on his own show. At first, Johnny stayed calm. He was a professional. Hesmold nodded and waited for his turn to talk. But as the part went on, hiding his anger became harder and harder. His smile started to go away. His laughter sounded fake. He moved in his chair like heckle didn't wait for it to end. His body language started to show what his face was trying to hide. His arms crossed, fingers tapping on the desk, and his eyes looking toward the crew, almost begging for a way out. Usually, Johnny was great at making any weird situation into something funny. He could joke his way through almost anything. But this time, there wasn't much he could do. The guest was totally taking over the conversation. It was not only rude, it was also disrespectful. The audience could feel it too. The usual happy feeling of the show had gone away. People at home probably moved uncomfortably in their seats, knowing how wrong the energy felt. The most annoying part, Johnny couldn't steer the conversation in any third direction. It felt like the guest wasted one running the show while Johnny was just sitting there with a fake smile. Finally, after what felt like forever, the show went to a commercial break. The cameras stopped filming and the audience clapped politely, though without the excitement they usually showed. Things were tense behind the scenes. According to some crew members there that night, Johnny didn't say a word during the break. He just stood up, slowly shook his head, and walked off stage clearly mad. That short walk backstage must have felt like a long sigh of relief for Johnny. It's rare for him to show his anger, but this time, his patience had reached its breaking point. In private, He reportedly later said, "That was one of the hardest interviews I've ever had. Coming from someone who had talked to countless people, that meant a lot." This meeting became one of those rare times where the polished and calm Johnny Carson looked clearly uncomfortable, not because of a bad joke or an awkward moment, but because someone just didn't understand. The art of conversation. Looking back, fans and show experts often say that this interview was a clear example of what not to do on a talk show. It showed the important balance needed between a host and a guest. No matter how famous or interesting someone is, a good guest knows when to speak and when to listen. Unfortunately, this guest missed that point. And for Johnny, who spent his whole career making others shine, it was a moment where he had to deal with something he really hated, being ignored on his own stage. Johnny Carson was known for many things: his smooth voice, quick humor, and that charming grin he showed to the audience each night. But one part of the show that fans really looked forward to was the animal features. They were wild, unpredictable, and usually filled with laughter. Johnny found them fun as well. They gave a fun twist to the regular celebrity interviews. Most of time, it was all in good fun. But one night, things got far beyond what anyone expected, and what was meant to be a light-hearted moment turned into something Johnny hated. That evening started like any other episode of The Tonight Show. The set was full of energy. The audience was excited, and Johnny was in a great mood. A well-known zookeeper had been invited to show some interesting animals. Everyone expected maybe something cute or entertaining, a talking bird or a baby tiger that would cuddle up next to Johnny. Instead, what came out was a large chimpanzee that, at first, seemed calm, but only at first. As the handler wrote the chimp onto the stage, the audience started clapping and lying. The chimp looked relaxed, curiously looking around at its surroundings. Johnny, always the entertainer, leaned in and made a joke to get laughter from the crowd. It worked. The audience yelled, and the moment made for a perfect picture, but that piece was short-lived. Without any warning, the chimp suddenly jumped onto Johnny's desk. The audience gasped in shock, papers were sent flying, and a glass of water spilled across Johnny's desk, soaking his notes. Before Johnny cold-reeked, the chimp reached out and grabbed a handful of his hair. At first, Johnny tried to stay calm, held nervously, and joked, "Well, I guess he's the host now." He wanted to keep things light-hearted for the crowd, but underneath that forced laugh, Johnny was far from happy. He sat there frozen as the chimp pulled at his hair and then pulled on his tie as if it were a toy. The animal started to screech loudly, a harsh, chaotic noise that upset everyone in the room. People in the audience were not sure whether to laugh or scream. Johnny's eyes darted toward the crew. This had stopped being funny. That become really scary. The zookeeper hurried to the desk, trying to calm the chimp by whispering commands and offering treats. Security people suddenly appeared on stage, ready to step in if the situation got worse. Johnny stayed as stiff as a statue, his hands resting on his lap, doing his best to avoid sudden movements or gestures that could scare the animal even more. After a few tense moments, which felt like for Johnny, the chimp finally let go of his tie and stepped back. The zookeeper successfully led it off the stage, still chattering and pulling at its leash. The audience clapped nervously, not sure of what they had just seen. Johnny took a deep breath, fixed his tie, and tried to regain control of the show. He quickly made a joke, something like, "That's last time I share my hair products." It got a few laughs, but even the audience could tell he was shaken. His usual charm seemed dimmed for the rest of the show. The fun had gone away. Once the cameras were finally off and the lights dimmed, Johnny's smile disappeared. Those near him said that he turned to his crew and in a serious voice said, "No more chimps ever." This wasn't just a casual comment. It became a rule from that point on. That incident stayed with him. Despite handling it like a pro on camera, he felt an emotion close to fear inside. He later admitted privately that he had been scared the chimp might bite or attack. Wild animals, even those that are trained, are never truly predictable. For someone like Johnny, who liked to be in control of the show, having such a loss of control was frightening. This moment wasn't just a small episode on Live It. For Johnny Carson, it became one of the most uncomfortable and hated segments he ever had to face. Even years later, whenever animal handlers were scheduled for the show, he would always ask, "Is it going to jump on me?" He was half joking, but half serious. It reminded everyone watching that live TV is far from safe, and even the most polished host can find himself in a very unpredictable situation. Johnny Carson was widely thought of as the master of comedy. His quick wit, perfect timing, and talent for turning any situation into humor made him the undeniable king of late-night VTV. Week after week, Johnny showed the best comedians, actors, and musicians on The Tonight Show. No matter the topic, he could always manage to find a funny angle. His legendary charm and skill in making light of an awkward moment made him loved by millions of viewers. But even Johnny, with his unmatched expertise, wasn't always ready for when things got out often. One night, Johnny had on a well-known comedian who was famous for his edgy humor and sharp wit. At first, everything seemed like a typical fun interview. The two exchanged ecos and the audience laughed at the usual playful banter. But as the segment went on, the comedian started to test the boundaries of good taste. What started as light-hearted humor started to go into more personal topics, and that's when trouble started. At first, Johnny went along with it, laughing and throwing in a few jabs himself. It was all part of the routine. Comedy often involves pushing limits, and Johnny was used to making fun of himself. But this time, the guest pushed it too far. As the jokes became more pointed, the atmosphere changed. The comedian started to make comments about Johnny's marriage, something Johnny had always kept very private. The audience felt the shift as well. What had been a light-hearted and fun atmosphere suddenly turned awkward. Then the comedian crossed a line. He made a comment about Johnny's divorce, a deeply personal subject he had never talked about in public. The room fell silent instantly. The laughter that had filled the space just moments ago vanished. It was as if the audience realized the joke stopped being funny. It became hurtful. Johnny hesitated for a moment, looking at the comedian with a smile that got tight immediately. It wasn't the usual relaxed grin, but rather the sort of smile someone wears when trying to hide discomfort. The crowd sensed the change. Johnny had always been skilled at keeping his composure, but this was a different situation. For an instant, a flash of hurt appeared in his eyes. He had worked hard to keep his personal life out of the spotlight, but here was a guest making a joke that went too far, one that broke the carefully built barriers of his privacy. In an attempt to recover, Johnny quickly changed the subject to move the conversation along. He didn't want that moment to linger any longer than it had to. But try as he might to shift gears smoothly, the damage had already been done. The energy in the room felt different. The audience's mood had changed, and it was clear that even though Johnny had skillfully read the discussion, he wasn't really all right. Johnny had a reputation for bouncing back from awkward situations, be it a bad joke, a technical issue, or an unexpected spreeze. But this moment was unlike any other. It wasn't simply a blunder or mistake in comedy. It was a personal attack on something he had worked to keep private. For someone who spent his career entertaining millions while keeping his personal life from the public eye, this joke was a harsh render that even comedians have their limits. The upsetting incident stayed with Johnny long after the show ended. Behind the scenes, he showed no signs of anger or frustration. Still, the experience left its mark. Johnny had always believed in the importance of laughter. It was his job, his life, and his passion. But that evening, he discovered that not every laugh is innocent. At times, comedy can go too far. The joke meant to amuse can end up causing pain to the person it targets. For Johnny Carson, this was among the most difficult things to learn. Later, while thinking about the event, Johnny admitted that comedy does have its limits. While he recognized the value of humor and self-mockery, he also understood that certain topics shouldn't be joked about. For him, personal matters were off limits, and anyone who failed to respect that was crossing a boundary he wouldn't forgive. This experience was a reminder to both Johnny and the millions of viewers that even the most funny people can have moments of vulnerability. Johnny wasn't just the man behind the desk delivering jokes. He was human as well, and some topics simply weren't funny. Not every celebrity is excited to appear on talk shows. Some may participate to promote a movie, album, or book, while others really dislike its spotlight and find themselves on those late-night couches filled with worry. But in the world of talk shows, a host's job is to keep a fun, engaging, and lively atmosphere. This is where Johnny Carson, the king of late-night TV, really thrived. He had an extraordinary talent for making guests feel relaxed and comfortable no matter how worried they were, but one guest clearly showed their disinterest in being there, which was unusual for someone off-tier fame. Instead of arriving with a beaming smile or a wave, they seemed almost unwilling to be present. As Johnny greeted them, they offered a cold one-word reply and quickly took a seat. It was as though they were somewhere else entirely, physically there, but mentally absent. There was no enthusiasm, no energy, just a chilly atmosphere that hung like an accord cloud. Johnny, always the complete profusion, tried to break the ice. He asked a question, but the guest responded with a short reply as if they were just fulfilling a duty. They avoided making eye contact, and there was no effort to engage with either the audience or Johnny. The silence between them grew more and more obvious with every tick of the clock. Johnny's usually smooth and confident manner started to falter. The discomfort between them became more and more real. You could see it reflected on Johnny's face. He was really having trouble connecting with this guest, something that rarely happened even with those reluctant to participate. At one moment, Johnny tried to ease the situation by sharing a funny story or making a quick remark to keep the conversation flowing. The audience expected that familiar laughter, but this time it never came. The guest responded in a dry manner, hardly acknowledging any funny attempt. The discomfort only increased, and it was clear that Johnny, the expert in late-night interviews, was looking for a way to escape this tense situation. But there was no escape. After the episode, rumors spread that Johnny was overheard saying, "If you don't want to be here, don't come." That comment showed how much meeting had upset him. Johnny believed in letting every guest have a chance to shine, but he also loved authenticity. He understood that when someone didn't want to participate, it made everything feel awkward. This wasn't just an ordinary, boring interview. This was one of the most painful and uncomfortable experiences of his career. Johnny Carson was famous for his quick humor, infectious grin, and ability to handle almost anything thrown his way. Whether it involved a clever joke, a surprise guest, or even an unexpected incident live on of, Johnny was the steady influence that kept the show moving smoothly. One evening, a guest brought out what seemed to be a fake snake. Johnny, with his typical charm and confidence, assumed it was just another harmless prop meant to amuse the viewers. As the guest passed it to him, Johnny made a light-hearted joke, grabbed it, and went along with it, fully expecting it to be a rubber snake. But in a startling turn of events, the snake wasn't fake at all. It was really alive, and it was not happy to be handled by someone unfamiliar. Without warning, the snake squirmed, slipping out of Johnny's grip. Taken aback, Johnny tried to play it cool, but his body language made it clear that this was far from funny for him. The scenario shifted from a light-hearted moment to a near disaster in just seconds. Johnny, always the complete professional, quickly collected himself, but anyone watching could sense that he was not happy, a feeling he rarely showed on air. After the broadcast, Johnny was open about his feelings. He quickly told the producers, "We never prank like that again, ever." This was one of those segments that got a few laughs, but definitely crossed a line for Johnny. He was the guy who brightened up living rooms every night, but behind that famous desk was a real person. Somianuho had his own limits. It showed that even the best can get thrown off track sometimes. Johnny handled it all with class. He didn't storm off or lose his cool. He stayed professional, but you could tell, even if you were just watching from home, that he felt uncomfortable when things went too far. There he was, Johnny Carson, the king of late night, silently hoping this segment would wrap up. These 27 moments may have made him cringe, but they also made him relatable. Maybe that's why we still look back at him so fondly. Behind all the charm and jokes, Johnny Carson was just like the rest of us, trying to smile through the chaos.